Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce you, creator, architect of this water and cooling tower, Leopold Bauer, Viennese architect. I apologize myself, I will read my paper. Leopold Bauer is the sort of figure that until recently seemed out of place in the history of modern architecture. At the beginning of his career, he was one of the stars of modern architecture in Central Europe. He was a pupil of Otto Wagner. In the left, you can see his first commission is the Villa Reissig in Brno, which was appreciated by critics as the first modern house in an Austrian monarchy. It's 1901. The second example is the Villa Kurz in his native town in Silesia, Jägendorf, Krnov, 1902. Later, however, he rejected his roots and switched to the position of new historicism and was appointed as a successor of Otto Wagner at the Viennese Academy. It's a Schützenhaus in Jägendorf, Chamberkammer in Opava, Troppau. He was a winner in the competition for Austrian-Hungarian Bank in 1911, and it's his design for this bank. It should be the first skyscraper in Vienna, but due to the war it was not executed. And this is former printing building, Druckerei, of the bank. Now it's Austrian National Bank. The design of large industrial structures was a branch of work that Leopold Bauer came to under the pressure of circumstances. After the end of World War I and the fall of the Habsburg monarchy, this formerly prominent architect lost his professorship at the Academy in Vienna and as well the greater part of his personal fortune. In the post-war slump in construction, Bauer could not refuse any work and thus was glad to accept commissions for factories, even though he was almost a complete beginner in this architectural field. However, it was not merely a desire for self-preservation that brought Bauer to industrial architecture. The traumatic experience of the war, in which all the forces of technological and scientific progress were placed in the service of a blindly destructive machinery, turned his interests away from questions of style and form towards urgent matters of economic and social order. Above all, how to gain control over the processes of modernization, which had so far brought humanity so little happiness. Struck by the material impoverishment and political uncertainty in the age, in 1919, Bauer put forward his proposal of how to cure the most serious ills afflicting the social organism of post-war Austria. In his book, Gesund Wohnen und freudig arbeiten, Live healthily and work joyfully, he expressed his hopes for a new, more rational ordering of society. Unlike a great many leading Austrian social thinkers, though he did not in the slightest incline towards a rejection of industrial production. Though he did see in mechanized factory labor, which alienated the workman from his work and prevented his full personal development, a serious problem of the modern age. He simultaneously viewed its efficiency as guaranteeing a satisfactory living standard to all classes of society. Bauer's pleadings on behalf of the positive force of modernity reached their apex in his enthusiastic description of the modern factory. A long quotation: "From what were once filthy and unhygienic workplaces, we architect and we engineer have created buildings that are definitely not lacking in natural beauty and strength. Possibly, the factory buildings represent one truly original and new building typology in our times. What for the cities of antiquity was the temple and the medieval cities the cathedral, for the city of the present day is the factory." Similarly to the designs for utopian cities of the 19th century, Bauer's urban conceptions placed manufacturing at the center of new settlements. In doing so, he argued, time would no longer be wasted for workers traveling from traveling to and from work, and energy efficiency could additionally be increased, since the waste energy generated by the manufacturing processes could be used to heat the surrounding residential buildings. Another argument for situating factories at the center of new metropolitan satellite towns was aesthetic. These buildings would have the strength characteristic of great landmarks. And Bauer finally added, there was the political dimension. Industrial architecture is an eloquent testimony to the political power of the working classes, paradoxically. Furthermore, Bauer held that the coexistence of manufacturing and residential buildings should act as a stimulus to a more cautious approach to the natural environment, particularly through the replacement of traditional energy sources with new ones, among which he even ranked solar energy in 1919. Workers' colonies should be given all the attractions of full-fledged urban life, such as shops, schools, public baths, theaters, and sport areas. At the same time, these suburban settlements should also allow their residents all of the advantages of rural life. He was a successor of John Ruskin in some respect. The first opportunity for the testing of the ideas was provided for Bauer by Willy Ginskay, a leading manufacturer of carpets and blankets in the North Bohemian time Mafrsdorf, now Vratislavice, near Reichenberg, Liberec. Ginskay company, which itself dated back to 1843, had collaborated with Bauer since the earliest years of the century. In 1906, the firm manufactured several series of carpets according to his designs, which were then displayed with considerable success, Grand Prix, at the exhibition of decorative arts in Milan. Barrow greatly prized Ginskay for his exceptional interest on the close symbiosis between modern art and industrial production, which he aided as well as one of the supporters of the German Werkbund. Bauer later made friends with the industrialist's second wife, the world-famed mezzo-soprano Julia Kulp-Ginskay. It was at her bequest that he designed the new light couple romantic mountain residence in 1919. It was designed for Hammerteich, Rybnikhammer, not far from here, but the seat, the residence wasn't executed. Yet, by this date, a number of factory buildings had already been completed to his design in Maffersdorf. The first of them was the power generating station, the plans of which were completed by Bauer in 1916. It's the neighboring building. There soon followed designs for water and cooling tower from 1917, here's the first version, and a warehouse and spinning mill for blankets from 1918. Additional manufacturing structures were designed by Bauer from 1923 to 24. And as late as 1929 came his design for a new spinning mill. Of course, due to the company economic situation, however, the majority of these proposals remained confined to the blueprint. Except for the power station and its adjoining tower, we only had the design of Bauer's, completed by Ginskay, was the storage area from 1924. It's here. It's here in the left. And this in a greatly reduced form. Further commissions for industrial corporations were forthcoming for Bauer thanks to his acquaintance with the merchant banker, publisher, and amateur author Richard Kolla, who's owner of great firm Ricola in Vienna. Evidently, through Kolla's agency, Bauer was able to win, even during the last year of the war, two major commissions: the Solo chemical works in Linz and the Sikra match factory in Szeged in Hungary. In the following years, he designed, along with several small structures, for the paper mill in St. Pölten, an entirely new factory for paper products in the upper Austrian town of Wels. The largest of these commissions represented assignments with a nearly identical program for Linz and Szeged. For the Austrian town, Bauer designed in the winter of 1918 a rebuilding of the power generator, and in June of the same year, a 5-story hall for the manufacturing of chemicals for preserving and cleaning leather, in addition to matches. This is a photograph from 1979, a year before the demolition of the chemical factory. For Szeged. For Szeged, in turn, he completed buildings. The completed buildings were a manufacturing hall designed in the summer of 1918 and a steam power generator from the spring of 1920s. And there are photographs from 1920, a short time after the construction. From the many texts of Bauer's that accompanied his factory designs, it can be assumed that he approached these tasks in a spirit of thorough rationality, and that his predominant goal was the precise fulfillment of a specified function. Industrial enterprise, in his understanding, was a complex of mutually interconnected functions, reflecting the complexities of manufacturing process. Architect's challenge was, he held, in bringing the buildings for the individual working processes into mutual accordance and connecting them into the form of the functioning organism. A quotation. For each factory, the exterior and interior of the building must more or less serve as the embodiment of the working diagram of production. In other words, that the organization of spaces for individual machines should be achieved so that the working process can run without disturbance from the raw materials to the finished product. Quotation ends. From such sentiments, it can be inferred that his aims was not merely the mechanical connection of individual structures, but rather the finding of their idea, organic interrelation, grounded in the detailed study of concrete manufacturing procedures. Another quotation. I see my goal as being able to design according to wishes and initial information of the factory engineers, the building that is the simplest, most practical, and most suitable for working as possible, as we Americans have already done for some time now. He wrote in 1931. The reference to American methods reveals what was contained between the lines. Bauer, with his theoretically most perfect working diagram, here presented himself as the embodiment of an all-powerful, scientifically designed rationality that he hoped to measure against the pragmatic experience contained in individual branches of manufacturing. In the steam-driven power station for Ginskaya factory, which contained both the boiler room and the generating turbines, such a spirit innovation was reflected in the positioning of the generating machinery on a raised floor, so that the complex mechanics of it remained easily accessible from below for maintenance. The vertical pipe boiler, Steinrohrenkessel, was positioned in turn 4 meters above ground level, and the space beneath it served for the removal of ash. Among the advantages of the new building was its perfect hygiene and easy maintenance. The white tiled walls and the marble-topped control desk of the turbine hall literally evoke a laboratory rather than a factory. Another new inspiration in which Bauer took particular pride was the conjoining of the water tower and coal storage. Close beside the power station, there rose a tower over 60 meters in height. On its highest level was the water tank and fire sprinkler for emergencies. Below it, a bunker for coal, and in the very lowest level, a series of motors to power both the pumps for the water reservoir as well the suction machinery for the coal store. Here, a suction pipe allowed the fuel to be moved with exceptional speed from the rail wagon into the bunker, from which it was then carried by conveyor belts through a special bridge directly to the factory boilers. The adjoining Warren House, buildings of impressive dimensions that could store both raw material and finished textiles, was designed by Bauer at the company's request, such that goods trains could enter entirely into it. The building material used for Bauer's factories was reinforced concrete, a material that he had come to favor from the very beginning of his career and often used even in monumental architecture, as you can see here. As Bauer's industrial buildings make clear, among the technical advantage, he ranked above all with impressive dimensions of buildings and with organization of internal spaces, as well as the load-bearing qualities of floors that this construction method allowed. Quotation. Technology allows, with respect to construction, a completely different formulation. For example, as concerns size, span, spatial formation. In accordance with this aspect, technology has an essential influence on the modern architect. Bauer stated in one of his lectures. In his writings, he repeatedly stressed the effect that the new technologies and materials had on the aesthetics of design. The factory, he asserted, did not require traditional forms. Hence, this building typology could in fact spur the birth of an entirely new style. Nonetheless, Bauer's designs show that in addressing the ordinary tasks of industrial architecture, he could not allow for any extravagance, and that function and economy had priority above strong aesthetic impact. We could hardly state that Bauer attempted any groundbreaking formal experiments in reinforced concrete. There is absolutely no indication that the exterior curtain could be separated from the concrete skeleton. The walls remained load-bearing and, with the exception of the power stations, were filled with the brick masonry. Nor did Bauer make any attempts to enliven the tectonic structures. He designed no broken surfaces or carved shells. Only in one instance was an unbuilt design for Ginskai's factory from 1923 did a glazed concrete wall appear. The fact that Bauer's industrial architecture is far from the expressive sculptural modeling that concrete could have allowed can in larger measure be explained by the character of the commissions. However, what issued from his blueprints were not simply the structural frameworks of rational calculation and sober utility. Even without great engineering expertise, it could easily be assumed that the material used would allow for a lighter and airier design. Bauer expressed his own aesthetic approach to the design of reinforced concrete structures in one article from 1911. Drawing on the arguments of Gottfried Semper, he cast doubt on the artistic potential of modern materials and forms derived from mere technological necessity. Slender iron girders, he contended, have, there's a quotation, have repressed all the organic methods of construction, such as arch, and created a corrupt system of building. Bauer, like Semper before him, insisted on the classical balance between beauty, firmness, and utility. Venustas, utilitas, firmitas. Consequently, he found in the insufficient mass of new structural methods a psychological and consequently aesthetical problem. In this aspect, Bauer made no great distinction between monumental architecture and utilitarian buildings. His water towers recall historic lighthouses or the turrets of a medieval city wall. The power generating station in Maffersdorf, here, with its mansard roof and window surrounds, bears a clear ancestry in the utilitarian buildings of the Baroque, while elsewhere the parallels with classicist factory design can scarcely be ignored. It would be an exaggeration to speak directly of historic references. These resemblances are more an association, an attempt to invoke the spirit of the simple yet powerful utilitarian structures of the past ages. What Bauer evidently had in mind were the tectonic and rhythmic principles of the classical tradition, whose timeless validity he defended with even greater vehemence in his monumental designs. For him, their power was such that even on the facades of his factory buildings, the massive concrete pillars and triangular gables recall the appearance of ancient temples. Factories were not simply to occupy the same position in the organism of the new city traditionally reserved for sacral buildings, but should even achieve the essence of their form. Though Bauer did not hold that the temples of antiquity should be directly imitated in functional structures, the classical ages, in his view, provided model examples of technical forms from which the modern architects may learn. That's the drawing from from Paestum, from Bauer's journey to Italy with Rome Prize. As he confirmed by his writings, he viewed the factory as equivalent to the temple for the modern age and containing all the main attributes of a monumental building. In this field as well, he set himself a task markedly similar to his more prestigious commissions. As late as 1937, he formulated his credo as follows: "We must strive again to overcome the matter of fact, to insert into architecture those structuring elements whose roots reach back into antiquity." Historicism and enthusiasm for technological utopia, the two complementary pillars of Bauer's thought, were far from easy to bring into mutual accord. Even though the emergency of a new style was linked to the aesthetic innocence of industrial construction, Bauer did not assign any basic style creating significance to structure and material. For a quotation, "For this, what is always necessary is the spirit that under the conditions of the structures creates new forms," he wrote in a review of a book on concrete buildings. And another quotation, "For not only every work of building, but indeed every work of technology is the output of fantasy." However, the outcome of the creative spirit was not only the formal repertoire of Bauer factories, but also their spatial organization. Wherever it was possible, Bauer designed these utilitarian structures along a strictly symmetrical axial plan bound by firm compositional relations. Even in 1929, he did not hesitate to plan the Maffersdorf spinning mills as a quasi-Baroque palatial grouping around a kind of ceremonial courtyard. At this juncture, the contradictions in Bauer's stance become clearly apparent. The architect appealed so strongly to the classicist doctrine of character, in which each building must unambiguously represent its purpose and its social determination, he directly spoke against its spirit. The motivation behind this contradiction can be uncovered without excessive psychologizing. Even in 1920s, Bauer's dream was most likely what it had been in the case of his older counterpart, Josef Maria Olbrich. Quotation, "Best of all, he would like to build Valhalla." This is doubtless the common denominator linking his vision of the factory with his studies of fantastic structures or the fairy tale illustrations that he sketched for his children. As a result, his industrial works, despite their ostensible modernity, have within them something fantastic and dream-like. It was a quotation. Bauer strove to grant industrial architecture an aura of ceremony. In contrast to his generational cohort and at one time friend Adolf Loos, Bauer never doubted the artistic character of the architectural profession and the lasting value of this production. And when he declared his loyalty to the principles of Otto Wagner, he doubtless had in mind his teacher's conception of the redemptive mission of the architect, whose role and powers far exceeded those of the status of a mere engineer. However great and genuine his admiration was for technical inventions, he remained aware that they were invariably the first victims of rapid progress. Quotation, "Everything that corresponds to function meets this function for only a short time," Barrow stated in an interview in 1916. From among all the products of human activity, it is the work of art alone for whom the specific value does not decline, but rather grows with age. Thank you for attention.